Okay, welcome to the deep dive. We've got a bunch of sources here, and they're all about one specific character from King of the Hill.
John Redcorn.
Exactly, John Redcorn. So our mission today is to really unpack what this material tells us about him. His role, his whole journey in the show, based just on what these sources say.
Right, and it's interesting because the sources, they introduce him right off the bat with some, well, pretty big contrasts.
No. Like what?
Well, you learn he's a Native American character, he runs his own massage therapy business, and he's the front man for a band.
Big Mountain Fudgecake. Can't forget the band.
Definitely can't forget the band. But then there's the big one. He's Joseph Gribble's biological father, and Dale, Joseph's supposed dad, has absolutely no idea.
So immediately you're thinking, okay, this guy isn't simple. He's presented as, like, Arlen's chill spiritual guide, maybe.
Or maybe Arlen's chaotic secret lover, depending on, which side you're looking at.
It sets up this tension from the start.
Totally. He's a mix. The sources give us the basics: therapist, musician, secret dad, but then they immediately dive into the contradictions.
And the show itself seems to really lean into that, playing with those native character tropes you sometimes see.
You get glimpses of the spiritual healer thing, the nature connection.
Heavy quests, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and maybe a bit dismissive of, quote, white man's medicine. But then, like the material points out, he completely flips those expectations.
How so?
Well, he wears fanny packs. He gets caught up in really petty drama with his bandmates. And honestly, he seems totally stuck in this pretty toxic situation with Nancy. He just can't seem to quit her.
Right. It's that combination, isn't it?
Yeah.
The sources call him, like, tragicomic.
That's a good word for it.
He has these moments where he seems quite insightful, almost enlightened. But then other times he's just really emotionally immature, trapped by this huge secret.
And that complexity, I think, is why he's so memorable. It makes him feel real, despite the, sometimes outlandish situations.
Definitely. And speaking of complexity and secrets, we have to talk about the affair.
Oh, yeah. The big one. The love triangle.
With Nancy Gribble. 13 years, according to this material.
13 years. Yeah. And the sources are pretty direct about how it started. Just a single hookup.
No way.
Yeah. Dale was apparently off at some UFO convention.
Oh, she was.
Right. And Nancy and John hooked up. That one time resulted in Joseph.
Wow. Just one time. And that snowballs into over a decade of secrecy.
Exactly. And Nancy decides, okay, Dale can think he's the father, and John, he just sort of goes along with it, becomes this permanent fixture in the background, hovering, as the sources put it.
He doesn't exactly keep a low profile, though, does he? The material mentions his attempts at subtlety are not great.
Not great is an understatement. He makes these little digs, these passive-aggressive comments right at Dale.
Like that example from Nancy's voice.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Where he tells Dale completely seriously that he's not Joseph's father, in a spiritual sense.
And Dale just laps it up, thinks it's some profound insight.
Total Dale move. It's that perfect, uncomfortable, King of the Hill blend of comedy and just awkwardness.
It is. And this brings up something else the sources touch on, like kind of weird irony of Dale's situation.
You mean because he's clueless?
Yeah, his total ignorance seems to be the key to his happiness, in a way. He loves Joseph, no question. And Joseph even ends up with some of Dale's unique interests.
Like the conspiracy theories. Yeah.
Meanwhile, John's stuck. He's living this lie. And you got to wonder, like, the material asks, does he want the truth out? Or is he trapped by guilt? Maybe something else.
It's complicated. There's that detail in the sources about an episode where he gets really close to telling Dale he's right there.
But he stops. Why?
Well, the interpretation offered here isn't that it's purely out of kindness towards Dale. It suggests he stops because the secret gives him leverage over Nancy.
Oof. Okay, that adds another layer, a darker one.
It really does. It highlights how messy and, frankly, how controlling that whole dynamic became over the years. It's not just about protecting feelings anymore.
Definitely not. So, shifting slightly, the sources also get into how the show handles his native identity. This is always a tricky area.
It is. They mention the creators' backgrounds and also that the voice actor, Jonathan Joss, is native himself, which is, important context.
But there's still some criticism noted in the material, right?
Yes. The point is raised that John sometimes leans into those magical native stereotypes.
Okay, give me an example from the sources.
Like him doing a ritual that supposedly cures Hank's bad back, or claiming he has the power to make it rain, stuff like that.
Right. I can see how that could be seen as stereotypical.
But importantly, the sources immediately bring up the counter-argument, which is that the show also seems to deliberately mock the way the white characters fetishize or misunderstand his culture.
Ah, okay, so it's working on multiple levels.
Potentially, yeah. Think about the powwow episode. The
Hmm,
material highlights John's deadpan delivery when he says someone's plastic tomahawk is offensive.
right. So it's not just using the tropes, it's also commenting on them and how other people react to his identity.
Exactly. And it gets even messier because the sources point out that John himself admits he sometimes played up his heritage, exaggerated things to sell more Big Mountain Fudgecake CBs.
Ah, okay, so it's complex. The show is maybe trying to critique appropriation, but it's also using John's background and people's reactions to it for jokes. It's a weird balancing act.
It really is. It occupies this kind of gray area.
But what seems to come through strongly in this material, maybe even more than the cultural stuff, is just his humanity.
I think that's right. The sources argue that his main struggles, his pride, feeling lonely, having what looks like a midlife crisis, they aren't framed as being just about his race.
They're more universal.
Yeah, they feel like the struggles of a guy who maybe peaked in high school or made some choices he regrets, and now he's just grappling with it all, like anyone might.
So, thinking about his whole arc,
Yeah.
does he actually change or grow by the time the show ends? What does the material say about that?
It points to some definite shifts. He does finally end the affair with Nancy, which is huge.
What about time?
Right. He starts dating other women. And he actually develops like a real bond with Joseph more openly.
Okay, so there's progress, but the elephant in the room.
Still there. The sources are very clear. He never tells Dale the truth about Joseph.
Which feels, honestly, very King of the Hill.
Totally. No big dramatic reveal, no easy resolution. It's quieter. It's more about John maybe accepting the choices he made and trying to move forward differently, even with the secret intact.
And there's that moment mentioned where he actually helps Dale out in edumacating Lucky.
Ah.
Suggests maybe some kind of weird, grudging respect developed.
Yeah, possibly, or at least a tolerance born from decades of proximity. And Joseph's take is interesting too.
How so?
The sources suggest Joseph becomes sort of semi-aware of the whole situation, but ultimately, he seems pretty indifferent about who his biological father is.
Huh. Life just moves on around the secret.
Pretty much. The takeaway from the material seems to be that some secrets just fester, they become part of the furniture, and life adapts. And you get that classic John Redcorn line the sources mention.
Oh, the one about the white man stealing his land.
And his woman. Yeah. It kind of perfectly sums up his complex, often resentful place in that world.
So if we try and pull all this together from the sources,
Yeah.
who is John Redcorn? Is he tragic? Is he a bad guy? Just a dude with amazing hair?
I think the material suggests he's, well, all of the above. He's shown as flawed, definitely. Sometimes funny, sometimes frustrating. But fundamentally human, caught in a really messy life.
Yeah. Flawed and human seems right.
And it leaves you with those questions the sources raise, doesn't it?
Like, shit, I've just told Dale years ago.
Right. And also, is Big Mountain Fudgecake any good? We never really find out.
And the eternal question, how does he maintain that hair?
The real mystery.
Seriously, though, maybe the biggest thing to think about after digging into all this material on John, Nancy, and Dale is what that giant long-running secret says about truth and happiness in their little corner of Texas.
Yeah. Is Dale's ignorance really bliss? Or is the weight of that secret always there, kind of subtly shaping everything, even if he doesn't know it?
Something to chew on for sure.